Hello. This special session will be all about the European Parliament as a super exceptional institution with the directly elected members with a strong democratic mandate and growing powers on the scale from beginning of the European integration until Lisbon Treaty, and now their powers were growing. And that's something that may be an argument to growing democratization of the EU. Before we go to concrete things, like practical terms, how European Parliament works on a daily basis, let's resume a few most important information about it. So we know that they have elected members. We know that the numbers of the members of the European Parliament, we will call them MIPs, member of the European Parliament, MIPS. Member of MIPS is proportional to the population of the country they're coming from. The ordination for election of the European of MIPS is decided by the countries themselves. So there is no European ordination, so that the ways how they are elected may slightly differ in the different countries. We know that they have two headquarters in Brussels and Strasbourg. And one additional fun fact, the administrative work for the European Parliament happens in Luxembourg. So we have three different countries that are sharing responsibilities for the one institution. That's weird. That's causing lots of logistical issues. But sometimes it was an effect of the compromise. We also know that MIPs are not representatives of their countries. They are not bonded with their directives, governments of their own states. At the moment when a person from Spain, Germany, Poland, whatever, becomes a MIP, this person is no longer bonded with their national interests, but it is bonded with their European European interests. So they should work as representative of the whole community, not their own country, and that's something that is called that they are functionaries of the EU, not representatives. So there's different status of members of the EU institutions, functionaries and representatives. Of course, they may sometimes experience a pressure from their own countries on certain processes, and let's not forget that still, when the electoral campaigns for the European Parliament are organized, many future MIPs are referring to making promises that they will do something for their own citizens, for their own country. Bullshit. They shouldn't. They shouldn't even talk about it. They shouldn't even think about it. They will be European functionaries. So yeah, this is this imbalance, let's say, between the national strengths and their statutory or treaty-based function as the EU functionaries. Another interesting thing is that European Parliament is divided into not political parties, but political groups. And this is something different than parties. Of course, MIPs are coming from their parties on the national level. We have different kinds of parties on the national level. They are not overlapping sometimes. They're not even comparable between the countries, as we are very, very different political-wise. But in the European Parliament, they have to be collected into a fraction, so a group of politicians with more or less the same ideological line. And that's very arbitrarily decided, and that's very based on the trust and declaration. So that, for example, members of the parties from Poland that are essentially very close together, no? But they're both conservatives, they're both more with moderate opinions regarding the market and other issues, they can land up in two different fractions. And that was the case, for example, of two Polish right-wing parties where one landed in EPP party, EPP fraction, sorry, so the European People's Party, Christian Democrats, and the other that was trying to differentiate from them landed in the conservatives and reformists. No? So you can be very close, but land in a different fractions. There is also possibility for the government of the fraction to suspend certain members based on their not fulfilling values, principles of the fraction itself. This is very weird procedure, and again, it's very difficult to convey. You know, how can you prove that somebody's ideology is not aligning with the official ideology of the fraction? So that's again a very interesting plot or point from the all European Parliament department. What else? There's no voting discipline in the fraction, so different MIPs can vote differently, and it can be organized very differently. And it's also possible that two people from the same country from the same country party can land in a different fractions. No? The technical possibility for that it is. But of course, their original mother parties would probably lynch them for such thing. So there is this front of national party management and the fraction management. Of course, fractions have their own government, so they have presidents, and they can essentially be organized as a political party. They're just not them per se. For the powers of the European Parliament, we know that it has a role, a very important role in the legislative procedure, and this is the main, the most important activities of the European Parliament, to take part in the legislative procedures of the European Union. We know how it looks like, that the European Commission has the legislative initiative power, so they can propose an act and send it to the European Parliament and the Council, relevant Council for the concrete issue. And those two institutions have to co-decide, adopt it, and so on. How does it look like in details? Before the Commission proposes a certain act, they can be influenced by few institutions. So those following institutions can apply to the European Commission so that the European Commission proposes a certain act of law or takes up a certain topic. And this can be European Investment Bank, it can be European Central Bank, it can be European Parliament. So the European Parliament as a whole, or as a group of MIPs, can put the petition, it's not called a petition, but let's call it this way for this purpose, can ask European Commission to take up certain topic and propose certain act of law. So that's pretty important and a powerful tool to impact legislation. Also, a fourth institution that can propose to the Commission so that the Commission proposes an act is the Citizens' Initiative. I don't remember if we talked about it, but at least 1 million of EU citizens from at least 7 member states can collect signatures and propose to the Commission so that the Commission proposes a certain act of law. There were not many cases where the citizens, 1 million citizens, can be organized and collect 1 million signatures, but some cases like that were happening, and as far as I remember, very few, or not even one proposal from the Citizens' Initiative was taken by the Commission. But the Commission, when rejecting it, has to justify why. And usually, in this case, the justification was that European Union doesn't have a competency in the field that you're asking us. So 1 million citizens organized themselves, probably spent a lot of time and money to do that, didn't check what is the competences of the EU. And last party, let's say institution that can propose to the Commission to propose certain law is 1/4 of the member states. So the governments of 1/3 of the 1/4 of a member state can also ask the Commission to propose certain act of law. So Parliament is one of those things. Also, how European Parliament can influence the Commission so that they can propose certain acts of law is that the Parliament approves annual working plan of the Commission, and this is the second instrument how they can influence policy making before it is proposed by the Commission. So we landed in the moment where the legislation initiative takes place. So the Commission proposes an act of law to the European Parliament and in the same time to the Council. This is sometimes somehow different from our EU on the board game. We simplified it in the game, but in the real life it happens exactly like that, that the Commission sends in the same time the proposal to the country to the Parliament and the Council. And we have a first reading in the Parliament, then we have a first reading in the Council. If those two institutions agree, the act is adopted. If they don't agree, they have amendments, and then to get those amendments amended version has to be analyzed and worked upon by the Council, and the Council can do the same. So there is back and forth work all the time. But the principle is that the Parliament and the Council are working on the same version of the document in the same time, so that they can cooperate and adopt and make an agreement on which version to adopt. This whole procedure is called a co-deciding procedure. So Parliament and the Council have the same power over this process. And this is important because European Parliament, as the representative of the whole EU, has the same power as the Council, that is representatives of the member states. Do you remember? In the Council, there are ministers from each member state. So this balance that I was talking about during the second day is manifesting itself this way. Of course, in order for Parliament and the Council to agree to speed up the work, because it would be ping pong, back and forth, they have special ways to agree, or to agree before the official plenary sessions when the MIPs and ministers vote. Of course, separately in the plenary session of the European Parliament and the session of the Council, so that in Brussels, representatives of the Council, they're I forgot the word. Permanent representatives of the ministers are constantly present in Brussels, and they form COREPER. So the committee of the permanent representatives of the ministers, that they can be part of this legislative process in between the meetings of the ministers. So the COREPER members, let's say a delegate of the Polish Minister of Education and Youth, we don't have such a minister, but education, is constantly in Brussels to cooperate with the European Parliament to speed up the procedure of co-deciding about the laws. And this is pretty useful for the procedure to speed up. And of course, there is a possibility that after 3 readings in the Parliament, there is still no common decision between the Parliament and the Council regarding the certain law. And if there is no agreement, there come to play interinstitutional negotiations. So the Commission can enter the fields and have trilogue dialogues between Parliament members, commissioners or COREPER members, most usually COREPER members, and the European Commission. So those three main institutions are working together in the working groups to finally come up with some compromise and work on one version of the act of law that can be approvable and acceptable by all the parties. And if still there is no consensus made, there is the last instance, last resort option, a conciliation procedure. So after interinstitutional negotiations, so trilogues, when it doesn't reach any conclusion, we have a final option, conciliation. So the Commission and European Parliament working together with the so-called mediators to accept or to agree on the minimum text that can be acceptable by both parties. And if this stage is not successful, the whole act of law drops down. And if it's successful, this minimum consensual text is being adopted. How not to lead to such long procedures and negotiations is like working and negotiating the text of the act of law before it's even proposed. So before the Commission proposes the act of law, Parliament and the councillors, most usually COREPER members, can meet together to agree upon what is acceptable and what is not. So when the ministers are coming to Brussels to vote, they already have made a decision with the hands and heads of the COREPER members. So this is the what I've described is the ordinary legislative procedure, the exactly same process that EU on the board is explaining, but in more details. No, this you can see how the European Parliament what the European Parliament role in that process is, and how does this usually look like. Looking at the structure of the European Parliament, there are, let's review back a little bit. Where do I have it? The main page of the European Parliament shows the structure of it. So we have a president of the European Parliament with the powers of deciding about the agenda of the European Parliament plenary sessions. And right now, a president is coming from Malta. It's Roberta Metsola, if you remember from the quiz. We have 7 fractions, so political groups in the European Parliament. EPP, conservatists and reformist groups, Green Party, Green Group, and a few other. Of course, there are a few fractions that are openly Eurosceptical. We have also 26 committees, and those are the thematic committees. So when the Commission proposes a certain act of law, it's not being sent to the whole European Parliament, but to the Commission, and the Commission is working on the act of law and sends back the opinions. And before the plenary session, where there's official voting, the Commission already has pre-worked on it. There are also 45 delegations of the European Parliament members that maintain bilateral relations with the third countries or are delegated by the Parliament to, for example, monitor situation in different countries. There was, for example, a delegation of the EP to Poland to monitor its rule of law and democracy. And those committees and delegations build their own acts that are non-legislative, and so that the European Parliament plenary sessions can adopt them and take as the decisions of the whole European Parliament. And this is another topic, no? What kind of acts of law European Parliament can adopt? So those are the legislative acts. Being part of the legislative procedures that are a basis of of the law of the European Union. But there are also non-legislative acts that they can adopt, for example, ordination or opinions or recommendations. And they are not consequenting. They're not giving any consequences to the European Union law. So that there is, for example, opinion of the European Parliament about rule of law and democracy state in Poland, and this doesn't give any obligations to Poland, neither to European Union to act upon it. It's just an opinion of the European Parliament. But we may say that it doesn't have any power, but I would argue it has. This is the soft power of European Parliament, that members of the prominent members of the societies are discussing and shaping opinions and then giving interviews, and then certain narrative is being created around the issues. And opinions of the European Parliament may be omitted or may be completely disregarded by governments of the member states, but then the citizens have impression that there is a conflict between the European institution and the governments, and they can act upon this discrepancy about this conflict. Who is right, and then the voice of the European Parliament is being heard. Of course, the media belongs. We don't have European-wide media, and this European perspective in the national media is not fully represented. So the people's opinions are shaped mostly by the national media, but there are instruments to influence public discourse and public narrative, and I think European Parliament has a lot to do with that. But that's my utopian and idealistic opinion. What else about the European Parliament technicality that you should know? Fun fact. National parliaments receive all the Commission legislative proposals at the same time as the European Parliament and the Council. So also national parliaments have a role to play in the ordinary legislative procedure. So when they're receiving the act of law proposed by the Commission, they can give feedback to the Commission about it. So they still have a certain role in the EU lawmaking, national parliaments. Who would think? We usually don't remember about this tiny function. Fun fact. What else to know about work of the parliament? Is also maybe also voting. There are different majorities in the European Parliament. In the simple cases, the simple majority is being taken. So when from among the number of the MIPs that are on the plenary room, simple majority out of those that are present is being taken. So 50% plus one out of those that are present. So if and quorum is not required. So if there's 20 MIPs on in the room and 11 of them agree, those 11 MIPs can decide about certain laws. Of course, this is reserved for the least important cases. More important decisions are voted with the absolute majority. So where we have to have a quorum, so at least half of the MIPs have to be present, and not present are also counted to the majority. And the third 3/4 of the MIPs have to agree on the decision. Fuck, I messed that up. No, sorry. It's simple majority out of the overall number of the MIPs. And then there's the third qualitative majority, that is 3/4 of MIP members. So once again, simple majority, 50 plus 1 of those that are present. In absolute majority, 50 plus 1 of the general number of the MIPs, and 3/4 majority on the top of absolute majority to vote. And this three-quarter majority is for the most important cases. For example, where European Parliament stops trusting European Commission, they can vote no confidence for the Commission and fire the whole Commission. So, for example, when the Commission doesn't or rejects the proposals of the European Parliament for the Commission to propose certain acts of law, they can vote, the three-quarters of European Parliament members, they can vote to fire the whole Commission so that they can listen more to the European Parliament. And that's quite big power, but in the same time, three-quarters majority is pretty difficult to collect. The voting is by hand, raising hands, so very classic, all electronic. Yeah. Last thing maybe to mention, interesting thing about the European Parliament is that citizens, EU citizens from every member state can influence the work of the Parliament. How? They can petition to the European Parliament, and this has to be taken into consideration. Or the easiest thing is to simply contact your MIP, your member of the European Parliament from your region. And MIPs are present in their countries. They have their offices, deputy offices in their regions, and they have to be present there at least once per week. And they travel to Brussels, and then they travel to Strasbourg, and they are in constant travel. But yeah, they have to meet with the citizens, and they have to take into consideration their opinion. You can also contact the representation of the European Parliament in your country. There are the offices, usually in the capitals, where they serve information and counseling, but also they are official representation of the European Parliament in your countries. So you can simply write them. They're even answering to the messages on Facebook. Any social media they are present, they are trying to be very close to the citizens, and you may think that this is very distant, like all that, but they are really listening. No? They are for that. They are direct representatives of the citizens, and they are bonded with their mandate. So they have to care about their voters. So I highly encourage you to do so when you want to influence big policy making. And the last, almost the last, next to the ordinary legislative procedure that I was describing for the most of the time of this half an hour lecture, there's also special legislative procedure that is applicable to the budgetary procedure. But this is another half an hour, so I will just link you the instructions on how this procedure works. This is the procedure on adopting the EU budget. So this is the procedure where more co-deciding and more bondage and powers of the states are also present. And more about that you will find in the link. I hope this was not too chaotic. If you have any questions, I'm on Slack the whole day. See ya!